So 6 years ago, on December 19th, 2015, I went from being a completely able-bodied 19-year-old to a complete quadriplegic in just a matter of a few short hours. Legit no exaggeration here. Like, I walked into a restaurant just fine for dinner that night, to being unable to get out of the passenger seat of the car and into the hospital on my own. So in this video, I'll be talking about how it all started in the first place, what the recovery looked like, and just how my life has done a complete 180 since that day. Especially when it comes to what I'm doing on this YouTube channel, cause I never would have reconnected with video games if I had continued on with my plans and the path I was envisioning for myself at the time. And also because of my transverse myelitis and all the mobility issues and physical disabilities and chronic pain that comes with it, I never would have appreciated the sheer beauty and potential of video games as a medium, or at least to the extent that I do now. But before I get into all of that, I just want to thank each and every one of you who commented about your own personal experiences on that Trails video I uploaded this past summer. I couldn't respond to the overwhelming number of comments, but for sure I read all of them, and legit have been super moved by how many of you could relate to my struggles health-wise. Like, on one hand, it's awful to think that so many of you have suffered or are still suffering in that way, but it's also incredible to know that I'm not alone in this, and I can only wish you guys the best. I'm also so thankful to all of you who joined the Discord server after watching that video, chronically ill or not, and really just fostered the welcoming and, most importantly in my opinion, empathetic community that it is today. There's a link to the server in the description if you'd also like to join us, by the way. And just as a heads up, this video is mostly just gonna be cycling through photos and videos of my long hospital stay for the most part. But now, with all that said, we can finally move on to actual story time, starting with this necessary preface. So I had just returned home on December 16th, 2015 for the Christmas holidays. I just had an amazing semester at college back east and had returned only 3 days before everything with my TM went down. And I'm super grateful that I was at home when this happened, because I couldn't imagine not having my family there with me and being unable to fly across the country while paralyzed. But back to my life as a college student, I was super actively involved on and around campus, from belaying for the outdoor ropes courses to women's choir, and from student government to my internship at an adult day center, not to mention the fun but busy trips on weekends to other schools for MUN conferences. In other words, my schedule was insanely packed. So you might be asking though, why the hell did I do this to myself, and why is this important to the story? Well, backtracking a little bit more, my mom was sick during most of my teenage years, and she was completely bedridden in the final year of her life, which happened to be my senior year of high school. My dad and I were her caregivers at night once her home health nurse left, so even before I acquired my own illness, I'd seen up close and personal how quickly your health and mobility could go. My mom was a really adventurous lady back when she had good health. She loved hiking and skiing. So my approach to college was to take advantage of all the opportunities available there. Life is truly precious and so fragile. So because of that, I wanted to try all these new things and make the most memories possible while I still could. But oh boy, I was about to find out just how much I didn't know about the incredible feats our bodies do every single day, all without even having to think about it. Like, to this day, I still have to actively think about walking, as in I have to remember to activate the muscles of my glutes, hip flexors, etc., all in a particular order to even stay balanced and put one foot in front of the other. Like the vast majority of people, I never realized how much I took all of that and just overall good health for granted, because it never even crossed my mind that I would end up just like my mom, in having to deal with being physically helpless and unable to do anything for myself. So now, going back to how this all actually happened on December 19th, 2015, I was having dinner with my extended family celebrating my aunt's birthday, but halfway through dinner, I noticed this super weird sensation that was kind of like when your legs fall asleep. So every couple minutes or so, I shook my legs under the table to try and get rid of the pins and needles feeling. But it just didn't go away. So then I thought, well, okay, it'll probably get better once we've all finished eating and got up to leave. Like, I'd get a chance to stretch my legs a bit, and that should do it. Though, if only it were that easy. Because walking back to the car after dinner was nearly impossible. No one noticed anything weird though, so I don't think my movements looked any different at the time. But in my mind, I could barely control putting just one foot in front of the other. I was carrying the leftovers though, so thankfully I made it safely to the car without dropping anything. But while on the road, I started getting this headache on the left side of my head. And because I normally don't experience headaches, ever, and thank God for that, that's when I knew for sure something definitely wasn't normal. My dad was driving, so I told him I needed to go to the hospital right away because I legit thought I was having a stroke. And I was really just overwhelmed, but during other crises before in my life, my personal faith in Christ has always gotten me through. Even during times when gathering my thoughts to pray was too difficult, I've always felt like God knew what comfort I needed at the time. So all that night, I just kept going through the Franz Schubert arrangement of Psalm 23 in my head whenever I felt especially worried or anxious. And I know we all have our own experiences with faith and spirituality, so I don't want to get too preachy, but I'd truly be remiss if I didn't include something that means so much to me in my own story. But back to the actual car ride, when we finally pulled into the ER drive-thru, the numbness in my legs had already reached the point where I couldn't feel them at all, whether it be my hands on them or even where they were in relation to the rest of my body, if that even makes sense. And they definitely wouldn't move at all, so the nurses had to lift me into a wheelchair and wheel me into the ER, where I was seen to immediately, even though I remember seeing a lot of people in the waiting room. So over the next hour, the inability to move spread further up my body to the point where I could no longer move at all from my shoulders down. The medical staff had to turn me over themselves to administer various tests, including a spinal tap, which is when they insert a needle into your spinal cord and take a sample of your spinal fluid. Apparently, this procedure is known to be incredibly painful, but I guess the one good thing about the full body numbness was that I didn't feel anything, thankfully. Another huge blessing that night was how we caught the MRI technician right before he was supposed to leave for the night. And as you all can probably picture, it's important to do everything with the utmost urgency when it comes to health stuff. So it was a relief knowing that all the tests were done ASAP. So Ultimately, I spent the next couple days completely unable to do simple tasks such as literally sitting up or even turning in the bed by myself. The nurses had to come in at least every couple hours to shift my position so I wouldn't develop bed sores. And I was also started immediately on immunoglobulin IV treatments during my first night there in order to reduce the inflammation in my spine. Thanks to this, I regained some function of my arms, though I could barely use my hands. So I had a really hard time with fine motor control and kinda barbarically gripped my utensils and ate pretty messily. At least I didn't mind the hospital food very much and even thought some stuff was pretty good. But as for my actual MRI and other test results, they kept coming back inconclusive, and there was a disparity of opinion between the MRI technician and the neurologist about what was going on. But thankfully, UCSF Neurology Department, which was ranked number 4 in the world for neurological illnesses, was only a couple hours from us, so it was a huge answer to prayer when we got the okay to get transferred there. So a couple days later, on December 23rd, I was officially transferred to UCSF, where I'd meet an incredible team of medical staff that was absolutely vital to my recovery. And many more days of testing later, I was finally diagnosed with idiopathic transverse myelitis. Idiopathic meaning the cause couldn't be determined. TM is a rare inflammatory neurological disease and is classified as such by the National Organization of Rare Disorders. It only sees around 1,400 new cases each year, and many of these cases, including my own, never see the cause identified. In hindsight, I feel incredibly blessed that it didn't take long to get a diagnosis though, since I've heard in the TM peer groups I've been in about people who struggled to get their diagnosis for years, and because of that, many of them missed out on the most opportune window to receive vital treatment, which has resulted in little to no recovery, meaning many still can't walk and rely on a personal caregiver just to do their daily living tasks. UCSF also had all the newest and state-of-the-art equipment too, so they were able to get me out of the hospital bed for the first time in days. They hooked me up to this harness thingy that could lift me up and onto a chair, and at that point, I was just so happy for the little things. Like seriously, you have no idea how good sitting entirely upright and not just slanted forward in bed felt. I was also started on plasmapheresis treatment, wherein old plasma from my blood cells gets replaced with new plasma. I really began to see some nerve functioning returning thanks to this 5-day treatment, and it was to the point where I could get started on physical therapy, which included attempting to walk, though with the help of the same harness machine since I had no strength to even stand upright on my own. And as you can see in the video, my ankles kept rolling outwards and was something that I'd be working on for the entire rest of 2016 with the help of leg braces and consistent strengthening exercises. Which, speaking of PT, I was eventually transferred from UCSF to a very good spinal cord rehab facility. And it was definitely a humbling experience being among so many peers who had much worse function and future prognoses than me. At the same time though, it really motivated me seeing all of us working hard towards getting the most function back possible. Occupational therapists taught me how to navigate around my new reality and adapt everyday objects so I could continue to do daily tasks on my own. Simple things like literally dressing myself, bathing, cooking, and other things that I never had to think of before were now done in a completely different way. I worked hard with my physical therapist as well, starting from the beginning of learning how to balance on my hands and knees. I was essentially learning how to activate all the muscles in my body again, the way babies first learn to sit up, crawl, and eventually stand and walk. And learning to stand again was pretty excruciating at times, since the brace that kept my left ankle in particular from rolling was really painful to wear. There was this awesome piece of technology called an exoskeleton, pretty fitting name, right? That was being tested at the rehab facility though, and I was a very good candidate for it. It basically was an electronically powered frame that helped my body reteach itself how to walk. If I activated my muscles in the correct order, the machine would read it and simulate the motion of taking a step, basically propelling my leg forward for me. I definitely think practicing with this exo machine helped reactivate my muscles faster than if I hadn't had this opportunity. But once I was eventually discharged from the hospital, after a total of 40 days there, I continued to live at home with a wheelchair for a little over half of 2016, while I supplemented my physical therapy with the standing frame I had built in my room. I slowly progressed from 20 seconds to 30 seconds and so on until I could finally stand for a couple minutes at a time with a walker. I moved on to forearm crutches in about the last half of 2016 and was finally strong enough to transition to trekking poles commonly used in hiking by the new year, which I still use today. I'm truly grateful for so much throughout this journey, but I'd be absolutely lying by omission if I didn't talk about everything that sucked too. I want to help normalize talking about what's affecting our mental states by opening up about my own struggles and being transparent about my emotions. So one thing that definitely sucks is the constant nerve pain that got worse and worse as my nerves refired. And the chronic fatigue that tagged along didn't feel like such a big deal back in the early months when I was focused solely on my recovery. But as I tried to add some semblance of other activities and continuing my studies back into my life, suddenly it became much more difficult to manage my energy levels and my schedule. I've tried so many different therapies like acupuncture, different exercises, and medications, but the treatment for my constant nerve pain continues to elude me and so many others. And many of my unpredictable bad days are due to particular flare-ups of these symptoms. Something huge too was how frustrating it was seeing nearly everyone else in the world and just all around me in general do things so easily once I left the hospital. And not only that, but I suddenly had no hobbies to participate in anymore, seeing how everything I enjoyed for the past couple years prior either had to do with physical exertion I was no longer capable of doing, like hiking, or required a degree of independence I no longer had. I never returned to my original college, mind you. There are still times when I think about the stuff I used to do, but it's much less than during those tough years of 2017 and 2018. Thankfully, I have my mom and dad's examples of resilience to look up to, and their influence, coupled with some of my favorite Bible verses, Jeremiah 29:11 and Romans 8:28 in particular, are to thank for helping me adapt to my new normal. All of these things are why I'm a firm believer in how when one door closes, another one opens. And this mentality is how I got back into the world of video games for the first time since 2013. So this return begins when I bought a PS4 in February of 2017. For the first time in 4 years, I looked up new gaming releases. Well, besides Dragon Age Inquisition in 2015, but that's a story for another time. And I saw that Horizon Zero Dawn would be releasing in just a couple weeks on February 28th. So I looked up some trailers and was immediately convinced to pre-order right away. So when the game finally arrived and I got to boot it up for the first time, I was completely blown away. I legit teared up at times, just taking in all the gorgeous scenery and natural world because it reminded me so much of what I loved about hiking. Sure, I could watch documentaries or movies that featured gorgeous landscapes, but it was something else entirely to actively control Aloy and summit a peak, physically as her, basically. Likewise, the primary reason I love Genshin so much is the natural beauty in its scenery and how the open world exploration gives me essentially the same feeling of awe I used to get out on the hiking trails. And hey, shameless shill time, but I just launched a second channel focused on Genshin lore last month, so go subscribe with the link below if you like the game. But yeah, going back to 2017, imagine my absolute shock when I found out that one of my favorite games, Nier, was getting a sequel. Like, I had been away from the gaming sphere for so long, I had no idea Automata was even in the works. So that and Horizon is what I devoured in March. Then Persona 5 was released in English soon after. And whoa, something just hit totally different playing this game compared to my initial playthroughs of P3 and P4 so many years ago. Even though P3 is still my favorite to this day. You see, being able to just go out into the city, take the subway, and explore new parts of the metropolis without even having to do any prior research hit different now that I had TM. Cause you see, living with a physical disability now, I always have to do research on a place first if I've never been there before, since not every location has the accessibility or accommodations I need. And sometimes, even if some are listed, it doesn't always mean they're working when I do get there. I need a functional elevator to get to the second floor, for example. I talked about this and some of my experiences at a university I briefly transferred to in 2018, in the Trails video in the cards, by the way. But back to P5, being able to explore modern Japan, as anime-fied as it was, as Joker brings me to the biggest point I wish to make about the beauty of video games. You see, the absolutely unique thing that gaming offers that no other medium of storytelling has is player agency. Books, cinema, TV shows, and music still are all wonderful mediums in their own ways, don't get me wrong, but video games stand out if they take advantage of this player agency, or i.e., the degree to which the character can interact with and/or affect the world around them. With video games, I can travel to a foreign country and explore its sites without having to worry about accessibility, a la something like Uncharted. I can experience what it's like to live life as a person with a certain background that I don't have, like May and her mental health struggles in Night in the Woods. There have been times since getting TM where I've gone on the annual family vacations we have with my extended family, as per tradition, but couldn't even enjoy the whole trip because of TM symptoms flaring up half of the time. So the possibilities of VR and being able to capture real life places so I can visit too is so exciting to me. Video games also gave me something to be passionate about once more, as well as bridge the gap for me when it comes to making new friends for the first time since December of 2015. The capabilities of the internet are a true godsend for so many people like me who have chronic complications with health that can make it difficult to go out. And gaming plays a big role in helping many of us fulfill our very human need for socialization, whether it be MMOs, co-op, or just gushing about our favorite single-player experiences with people on Discord. I plan to release more videos about the potential of video games as a medium sometime in the future, by the way. But to wrap this up, while it's still really hard managing the symptoms of my TM, especially the chronic pain that just never shuts off completely, I can definitely say I'm enjoying life. I think a common misconception about life in general is that happiness needs to be some huge celebratory feeling all the time, which causes so many to be in an endless pursuit of the next big thing. Meanwhile, at least for me, it's helped my mental state to just focus on what I do have and work on being content and at peace with where I am. As much as summed up in my favorite passage, Philippians 4:11-13, which is also one of the most misquoted and cherry-picked verses, sadly. But yeah, I'm so grateful for the opportunity to meet so many amazing people thanks to video games and the opportunity to analyze this medium from a social work/psychology background. Which, hey, I make a ton of content on Trails, Persona, and will even be expanding into other Megaten spin-offs this year, so check out those vids and subscribe if you like this kind of stuff. Also, please like this video and share whatever thoughts you may have in the comments to help with the algorithm, thank you. And being an avid watcher of YouTube since legit Nigahiga's How to Be Blank video days, plus seeing how other content creators have not only made lifelong friends from this platform, but are also able to support themselves via YouTube, I'm just so glad I took the leap and started making videos 3 years ago. I'm continuing to build the channel up in the hopes that I'll be able to support myself completely someday, which, hey, if you like my content and would like to help, check out my Patreon. There are a number of perks, including name in the credits, Discord perks, early access, and other stuff. Also, follow me on Twitch and on Twitter if you wish, and finally, I want to give a huge thanks to all my patrons, especially Jared Breland, Captain Hobo, NT Luck, Big Klingy, Sam Bezjak, Thomas Parrish Jr., Francesco Santoyo Rego, Silverwind847, Sathya Selvaraja, M. Meownalin, Gigi Sora, Platinum Rose, and Malcolm Lowry. Thanks so much for watching this, guys, and until next time, take care. See ya!